A prince who insists he's left the palace behind, an anchor trusted by millions to cut through spin, and a studio stripped to black. Two chairs, two glasses of water, one conversation that can't hide anywhere. What was billed as a quiet, candid sit-down on NBC Nightly News becomes something else. An arm wrestle between entitlement and patience, between defensiveness and journalism. The studio was unusually still. For this one-on-one, producers had turned the set into a void. A matte black background, two low armchairs facing each other, a narrow glass table between them, and the soft halo of key lights swallowing everything beyond the circle. No audience, no applause, just breathing, cameras, and expectation. Lester Holt stood to greet his guest with the same measured warmth that keeps live TV from fraying at the edges. "Thank you for being here tonight," he said, voice even, posture open. "We appreciate your time." Prince Harry lowered himself into the chair with the economy of someone accustomed to lenses. Shoulders square, chin lifted a degree too high, he looked less like a man arriving for a conversation and more like someone bracing for a contest. "My schedule's tight," he answered, clipped, "but important topics deserve space." Lester eased in, setting a gentle tempo. "You've built a new life in the U.S. since stepping away from royal duties. A lot of people are curious what that transition has meant day to day. How has the adjustment—" "Adjustment is the wrong word," Harry cut in, a small, cool smile flattening the air. "I didn't adapt. I returned to my own rhythm. There's a difference." The sentence was short, the tone corrective. Lester absorbed it without flinching. "I see. Then let me ask about balance. Public scrutiny doesn't vanish. How do you—" "Balance," Harry repeated, rolling the word like grit on his tongue. "People say balance when they mean show us more. I'm not obliged to." The cameras pushed closer. Even the meniscus on the water glasses seemed to tremble in the light. Lester tried to soften the edges. "Your family, then. Viewers wonder about the simple things, mornings, routines. How do you and your wife support each other under pressure?" A smirk this time, unmistakably condescending. "Support? We're not a reality TV couple trading pep talks. People chronically underestimate us, as if we're barely holding it together. It's insulting." Frankly, Lester nodded once, slow, letting the barb pass. "I didn't mean to imply fragility. Many couples relate to public and private pulls, that's all." "Viewers relate a lot," Harry said, folding an ankle over his knee. "I'm not here to provide a seminar in relatable marriage. My children aren't public property either. If you're fishing for the fairy tale soundbite, we're happy." The period at the end of that sentence landed like a gavel. Lester turned a card. "All right, a broader lens. Your exit from the institution still fascinates people. What does the monarchy represent to you now?" "Nothing," Harry said, leaning back. "A theatrical set piece from my past. I stepped off that stage. Some would argue that set piece gave you a platform, that it still amplifies your voice." "If that comforts people, fine," Harry snapped, voice tightening. "But I'm here for what I say, not the name on a family tree." The black around them made the distance feel colder. Lester inhaled, then asked the question he knew would require scalpel-level care. "Your late mother, Princess Diana, her death reshaped how the world thinks about press and privacy. How has that experience informed what you're doing now?" A flicker crossed Harry's face. Then steel. "Dragging my mother's pain into every conversation is disrespectful. If someone thinks that's a ratings hook, they should examine their motives." "My intent isn't to exploit," Lester replied evenly. "It's to understand connection." "Did that loss influence the stance you take today?" "I'm sure everyone believes they understand," Harry said, impatience surfacing. "Being hauled back to the same point every time is exhausting." The water surface quivered again. Lester set his cards aside and met his guest's eyes. "Then a direct one. Some viewers hear your tone as arrogant. Is that a concern for you?" Harry's gaze cooled. "Arrogant? Saying things plainly isn't arrogance. I'm not required to sand down the truth so it goes down easy." The black backdrop rose behind them like a wall. Lester, the veteran surgeon, tried one more pivot. "Let's talk projects, charities, initiatives. What do you most want people to take away tonight?" We're already communicating those, Harry said with a shrug. If people care, they'll find them. I didn't come to recite brochure copy. Another door closed. In the control room, producers held their breath. Lester's smile was gentle, but the lines around it were firmer. I understand. Still, the goal tonight was to let viewers hear you from you. Viewers tend to hear what they want, Harry replied. That's part of your system. The camera caught the micro sparks leaping between two steady faces. As the first segment wound down, the only audible thing was breathing and the quiet hum of the lights. It felt like the opening gust before a storm front. In the next block, the questions would sharpen, the answers would lose their varnish, and the line between patience and provocation would disappear entirely, leaving that black backdrop to witness whatever broke first. The red recording light blinked again. The studio air felt heavier than before, quiet, but not peaceful. Lester Holt's voice, steady as an anchor's heartbeat, broke the silence. Welcome back. We're continuing our conversation with Prince Harry. Harry shifted in his chair, posture rigid, expression unreadable. His fingers drummed lightly on the armrest, controlled, but restless. Lester glanced at his notes, though he already knew the next topic by heart. He just wanted to give Harry a chance to exhale. Instead, Harry exhaled impatience. Let's talk about the life you've built here, Lester began evenly. You and Meghan have created organizations, media projects, and charitable initiatives. Some people say you've found your voice in America. Others believe you've traded one stage for another. How do you respond to that? Harry's eyes narrowed and his lips twisted into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Traded? That's a lazy way to put it. I didn't trade anything. I evolved. It's what people do when they stop being trapped by centuries-old nonsense. Lester absorbed the jab. So, would you say the criticism that you're still very much in the public eye despite wanting privacy is unfair? Harry's tone sharpened, a blade wrapped in velvet. Unfair? Lester, do you think freedom means disappearing? Privacy doesn't mean silence. It means choice. The press and people like you have a hard time with that concept. There was no mistaking the condescension. Still, Lester stayed composed. I understand your point, but when you give interviews, publish a memoir, appear in documentaries, Harry cut in quickly, his words crisp and cutting. Let me stop you there. Those are on my terms. You of all people should appreciate control over narrative. That's what journalists crave, isn't it? Control. The tension between them thickened. Lester leaned slightly forward, voice low, calm but firm. My goal is understanding, not control, and I think the audience is trying to understand how you reconcile rejecting the spotlight while repeatedly stepping back into it. Harry's eyes flashed. Because the spotlight doesn't belong to you, or the tabloids, or the monarchy. It belongs to whoever stands under it willingly, and I choose when it shines. The arrogance in his tone was unmistakable. Lester nodded slowly, the faintest sigh through his nose. Understood. Let's shift gears. He flipped a card. Your late mother, Princess Diana, is often cited as a guiding presence in your life. Many people, Harry stiffened. His voice turned cold. There it is. I was waiting for that. Lester paused, unsure what he meant. Waiting for what? The inevitable, Harry snapped. Someone always brings her up, like it's some emotional trigger to make me open up for the cameras. My mother isn't a storyline, Lester. She was a human being. Maybe try remembering that. The words hung like smoke. Lester blinked, taken aback, but maintained composure. I assure you that's not my intention. Her legacy matters to many people, yourself included. I thought it was fair to ask. Harry leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Fair? You think digging through personal trauma for ratings is fair? My mother died because of this circus, the same kind of media machine you're sitting in right now. So don't pretend this is about legacy. The accusation landed like a slap. For the first time, Lester's jaw tensed. His next words came slower, measured, the calm before his own storm. Prince Harry, I've covered war zones, disasters, and tragedies. You won't find me exploiting pain. I ask because context matters. People are trying to understand what drives you. Harry scoffed, leaning back. What drives me is none of their business. The silence stretched. The hum of the lights seemed louder. Lester looked at him directly now, eyes steady. You know, you remind me of every person I've ever interviewed who mistakes criticism for persecution. Harry's brows shot up, his jaw tightening. Excuse me? I said, Lester continued, calm but unyielding, you speak about accountability and truth, but every question seems to offend you. Every topic becomes an attack. Maybe the issue isn't the questions. The air changed. Harry straightened, eyes blazing. Are you analyzing me now, Lester? Is that part of the act? The calm journalist who slowly lectures his guest? Because if that's where this is going, I can save us both the time. Lester smiled faintly, not warmly, but with the quiet endurance of a man used to storms. This isn't an act, Your Highness. This is an interview. Then maybe you should learn how to conduct one without the sanctimony. There was a small pause, one heartbeat, maybe two, before Lester's voice came again, lower, heavier. I've interviewed presidents who showed more humility. Harry's lips parted, stunned for a split second before recovering into a sneer. And I've met journalists who showed more intelligence. The studio went deathly silent. Producers exchanged horrified glances behind the glass wall, one of them whispering, "Do we cut?" But Lester didn't move. He simply adjusted his glasses, looked directly at Harry and said, "Let's keep going." He spoke softly, but his authority filled the room. Prince Harry, you've made strong claims about wanting to move beyond the royal family. Yet every time you sit down for an interview, it's still about them. Don't you see the contradiction? Harry's eyes darkened. I talk about it because people won't stop asking. You included. Maybe take a look in the mirror before you question me about contradictions. Lester nodded once. Maybe I just see patterns. And maybe tonight we're seeing yours. For a moment, neither man spoke. The air was thick enough to cut. Harry leaned back, crossing his arms, his voice dripping with disdain. You know what, Lester? You wanted honesty. Now you've got it. But you might not like what it looks like when it isn't sugar-coated. Lester sat perfectly still, eyes locked on Harry. Honesty doesn't bother me, he said quietly. Entitlement does. The light overhead buzzed faintly. The camera operator's hand trembled slightly on the focus ring. By the time they cut to commercial, both men were statues, silent, stone-faced, unblinking. When the broadcast returned, nothing would be the same. The next segment would destroy what little diplomacy was left between them, and the world would watch a prince unravel Livy on national television. The studio returned from the break, but the silence between them had turned radioactive. Even the crew behind the glass seemed hesitant to breathe too loudly. The black backdrop swallowed everything. Two men framed in light, each sitting a few inches from losing composure. Lester Holt glanced at his notes but didn't need them anymore. This wasn't about questions on a card now. It was about control, respect, and who would flinch first. He cleared his throat softly, his calm voice returning like a steady hand on a shaking table. Prince Harry, before the break, you spoke about freedom and control over your story. Let's continue there. Many people admire your courage to speak out, but others, especially within the UK, believe you've turned that story into a brand. They argue that you've profited from rejecting the very institution that gave you a platform. How do you respond to that? Harry's laugh came fast, sharp, and humorless. Profited? That's such a tabloid word, Lester. You people love to turn every ounce of human experience into commerce, don't you? Tell me, are you profiting from this interview right now? Is that why you're sitting there pretending this is journalism? The words hung like smoke from gunfire. Lester didn't blink. I'm here to ask fair questions. You agreed to answer them. Harry leaned forward, eyes cold. I agreed to a conversation, not an interrogation dressed in polite diction. Lester exhaled through his nose, patience visibly thinning. Then let's make it a conversation. Why does every question feel like an attack to you, Harry? The prince gave a sharp smile, his jaw tightening. Because every so-called journalist believes they're owed a piece of me. They've spent years dissecting my marriage, my childhood, my mother's death, then have the nerve to sit across from me and call it curiosity. I've lived with the media's hypocrisy my entire life. Forgive me for not bowing to it. Lester's tone hardened a degree. No one's asking you to bow. Just to answer, Harry's eyes flared. Answer to who? To you? To viewers who think my life is entertainment? Maybe that's your problem, Lester. You've built an empire on other people's pain. It was too much. For the first time in the entire interview, Lester Holt's composed mask cracked. Only slightly, but enough. His voice came lower, firmer, controlled, but edged with steel. You've accused a lot of people tonight. Institutions, the press, even your own family. But the one person you haven't held accountable is yourself. Harry's expression shifted from surprise to fury. Accountable? For what? For wanting a life that isn't under constant surveillance? For refusing to smile while the press monetizes my trauma? Spare me the sanctimony, Lester. You have no idea what that's like. I don't, Lester admitted, tone steady. But I do know that when you spend years claiming you want privacy and then film documentaries about your personal life, people are going to ask why. That's not persecution. That's logic. Harry gave a bitter laugh. You think logic applies when the public decides what version of me is real? When headlines twist every word I say? You all treat me like an experiment. Poke the prince. See what reaction you get. Lester's jaw tightened again. Perhaps because you keep walking back into the laboratory. The sentence sliced through the air like a knife. Harry froze, the corner of his lip twitching. The studio seemed to tilt, just slightly, as he leaned forward, voice low and venomous. You think you're clever, don't you, Lester? You think this is some kind of moral victory, making the spoiled prince squirm for America's amusement? Lester didn't look away. No, I think the truth should stand taller than ego. And tonight, ego seems to be doing most of the talking. The pause that followed was suffocating. The producer's voice came faintly through Lester's earpiece. We can cut if you need. But he ignored it. Harry chuckled again. But this time the laughter was empty, brittle. You sound like my father, he muttered. Always lecturing, never listening. Lester's reply was calm, but it landed like stone. Maybe that's the problem, Harry. You stopped listening long ago. The prince straightened sharply, eyes blazing. You're walking a fine line, Holt. And you've been crossing them all night, Lester replied, voice barely above a whisper. A camera light flickered. A boom mic shifted slightly overhead. Every small movement now felt thunderous. Lester tried once more to redirect, his tone gentler but firm. Let me ask you this. Do you think your mother would be proud of the way you've handled all of this? The way you've spoken tonight? It was the spark that hit gasoline. Harry's chair shifted forward. Don't bring her into this, he snapped. You don't get to use her name to score moral points. You didn't know her. You didn't lose her the way I did. So don't you dare. Lester's eyes softened, but he didn't back down. I bring her up because you've made her part of your story and people still see her in you. But right now, all they're seeing is anger. Maybe anger is what happens when you've been misunderstood for your entire life. Harry shot back, his voice cracking, not with emotion, but rage. Or maybe, Lester said quietly, it's what happens when no one's allowed to tell you no. That landed like a punch. Harry blinked, stunned into silence for half a second, then laughed bitterly. You think you can shame me into humility? You have no idea who I am or what I've survived. I think the world does, Lester said softly, and they're still trying to recognize the man behind the outrage. The silence that followed was alive, vibrating, tense, endless. The control room counted down the seconds to break, but the moment had already stretched beyond the confines of broadcast timing. When the cut finally came, Harry's knuckles were white against the armrests. Lester leaned back, eyes steady, voice calm as ever. Stay with us, he said to camera. We'll be right back. As the screen faded to commercial, the studio lights dimmed, but the damage had already been done. This wasn't an interview anymore. It was a collision course. And in the next segment, something would finally give way, either Lester's patience or Harry's royal composure. When they came back from the break, the air inside the NBC studio felt charged, not with excitement, but with something raw and unstable. The hum of the cameras was the only sound for a long moment before Lester Holt's calm voice returned, a voice that had navigated wars, disasters, and political scandals. But tonight was different. This wasn't a breaking news broadcast. It was a breaking point. "Welcome back," he said, his tone steady but edged with steel. "We're continuing our conversation with Prince Harry." Harry gave a curt nod, jaw tight, posture rigid. The charm that had once disarmed audiences worldwide was gone. What remained was a defensive wall wrapped in royal entitlement. Lester turned slightly in his chair, setting his notes aside. Symbolic, almost theatrical. This wasn't about scripted questions anymore. "Prince Harry," Lester began, "we've talked about your departure from the royal family, your advocacy, and the challenges of fame. But I think what people still don't understand is this. If you truly wanted peace, why keep returning to the spotlight?" Harry's eyes narrowed. "Because peace doesn't mean silence, Lester." "I thought I made that clear." "You did," Lester said evenly. "But when every new project is another memoir, another documentary, another tell-all, people start to wonder if maybe what you really want isn't peace, but attention." Harry's lips curled into a faint, bitter smile. "Ah, there it is, the cheap shot. You really couldn't resist, could you? The old narrative, spoiled prince wants attention. Tell me, Lester, how original?" "I'm not interested in originality," Lester replied. "I'm interested in honesty. And what I'm hearing tonight sounds more like resentment than reflection." The tension in the studio could have shattered glass. Harry leaned forward, his tone icy. "You think you're clever, trying to psychoanalyze me on national television? You're no different from the tabloids, Lester. You just wear better suits." Lester's composure barely shifted, but there was something sharper behind his eyes now. "Maybe the difference is that I don't sell pity. I ask questions, and right now you seem incapable of answering any without feeling persecuted." Harry's jaw flexed. "Because your questions are veiled insults." "They're only insults if you have something to hide," Lester shot back. For the first time all night, the camera operator flinched, because the silence that followed felt dangerous. Harry's laugh came suddenly, a hollow sound that echoed off the walls. "You think you've got me cornered, don't you? You and every other smug journalist who's made a career out of tearing down people like me. But here's the truth. I don't need your validation, Lester. I never did." Lester's reply was calm but devastating. "Then why are you here, Harry?" That stopped him cold. The question hung in the black void between them, as if the lights themselves were waiting for an answer. Harry blinked, his confidence faltering, just for a heartbeat, before he recovered. "I'm here because I believe in speaking my truth. And yet every time you do," Lester said quietly, "you make it harder for people to believe you." Harry's face flushed red. "You're twisting my words." "No," Lester said, leaning forward slightly. "I'm holding up a mirror. The world has watched you for years. The interviews, the memoir, the documentaries. You've told everyone how much you despise the monarchy, but everything you've built is still rooted in it. You criticize it, but you live off the fame it gave you. You reject titles, but you use them when it suits you. You demand privacy, but sell access to your story. Which is it, Harry? Which truth are we supposed to believe?" Harry stood up suddenly, the chair scraping against the studio floor. "You're out of line." Lester stayed seated, his voice a calm blade. "No, what's out of line is this constant performance of victimhood. You talk about being trapped, but you've built the cage yourself." Harry's hands clenched at his sides. "You think you can talk to me like that because you sit behind that desk every night acting like the moral compass of America?" Lester finally rose to his feet, slow and deliberate, towering over the tension. "No, I think I can talk to you like that because I've spent decades listening to people who earned their scars. You just inherited yours." The words hit like thunder. For a moment, Harry was speechless, eyes wide, mouth open, breath shallow. When he finally spoke, his voice trembled between rage and disbelief. "You don't know anything about me," he hissed, "about what it's like to lose everything." Lester shook his head. "You didn't lose everything, Harry. You walked away from responsibility and called it courage. There's a difference, that was it. The last line, the breaking point." Harry's face hardened completely. "This interview is over." He ripped off his mic, the small black device falling to the floor with a hollow clatter. Crew members froze. The only sound left was Harry's footsteps, sharp, echoing, final, as he stormed out of the studio and vanished behind the dark curtain. The door slammed. The silence afterward felt seismic. Lester stood there for a moment, breathing out slowly, before turning to face the camera. His expression was composed, but his eyes betrayed fatigue. The weight of what had just unfolded lived before millions. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said quietly, "this isn't the conversation we intended to have tonight. We hoped for insight, for reflection. Instead, what you witnessed was the collapse of one. I want to apologize to our viewers for the tone this took. Journalism isn't about confrontation, but sometimes confrontation finds us." He paused, straightening his suit, his tone somber but resolute. "Respect is a two-way street, and tonight, one side decided to walk away." The broadcast cut to black. What began as a calm, dignified interview turned into one of the most talked-about moments in modern television. A prince undone not by scandal, but by his own attitude. The confrontation between Prince Harry and Lester Holt would dominate headlines for weeks, sparking debates about ego, entitlement, and accountability. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more real-time breakdowns of the world's most dramatic interviews.